Okay, hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome here if you are new. I am going to start off today by just saying I did try the filling in this pie when I was making it, because how could you not? And is all I have to say. I'm so excited to try this all put together. It is a peanut butter pie with an Oreo cookie crust and Reese's on the top. And then I also made this tuna melt, which kind of oozed out all over the place, and I tried to conceal it with the cheese, but it didn't really work, so here we are. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and try this. Well, at least it got a cheese pull. I put spinach, pickles, tuna, provolone cheese, and I mixed the tuna up with like some mayonnaise and some dill, salt and pepper. Oh, and this is a sourdough loaf. Tuna sandwiches are one of my favorites. You know, I feel like people are sleeping on Subway's tuna sandwich. If you haven't tried it, you really need to. If you like tuna, it's so good. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about DB Cooper, whose name was actually Dan Cooper, and his name got mixed up in the news. Like a news reporter called him DB Cooper one time, and then that's who he became, but his name was really Dan Cooper. Well, his fake name was really Dan Cooper. So back in November of 1971, a guy went to the airport in Oregon and he wanted to buy a ticket, a plane ticket, to fly to Seattle, Washington. And he didn't use any credit card. He gave the name Dan Cooper. He paid fully in cash, and he went through airport security, everything. He didn't really have like a whole lot of luggage. He was dressed in a suit and a tie with like some nice loafers and a trench coat. And he was described as I think he was 6'1" or 6'2", blue eyes, black hair, kind of like swept over. It was parted from the left and swept over. And his appearance is kind of important because it plays into like the suspects and stuff later. And this guy just hopped on the flight and there he was, off to Seattle. So this guy is on the flight and he orders I think it was a scotch and soda, some kind of an alcoholic beverage. The flight attendants recalled everything from the night. And he handed the flight attendant a note. And when she read it, it said, I have a bomb on this plane. I want you to sit down next to me. And so the flight attendant, not wanting him to like set the bomb off, sat down next to him, and he pulled out his briefcase and then showed her. He opened up the briefcase and there was a bunch of wires, like red wires wrapped around a bunch of stuff, just to kind of show that like, hey, I do have a bomb in this briefcase, so you should do what I say. And he handed her another note that said, I want $200,000, which at the time in 1971 equated to about $1.2 million today. And he also wanted 4 parachutes for ransom when they landed in Seattle. So they landed in Seattle. There were 36 passengers on board. They all got off safely, and the police ended up giving him the ransom money as well as the 4 parachutes. I really want to try this, so I'm going to. I'm so excited. I love peanut butter pie. Oh my gosh. This was the easiest thing to make. It was like 5 ingredients. And I just measured that how I thought was right too. I just looked up what the ingredients were and added as much of whatever as I wanted. Oh, it's so good. So now that the passengers are off, he has his money, he has his parachutes. He tells the flight crew, so the pilots, the flight attendant, the flight engineer, to fly him to New Mexico. There were no other stipulations to the request. It was just, fly me to New Mexico. Their first spot where they were supposed to refuel was in Reno on the way down, I think. So somewhere between Washington and Reno, D.B. Cooper jumped off the plane. He had the money. I think he took 2 parachutes with him, 1 and then a backup. And he jumped out, I think around 10,000 feet, because that was another one of the things he told them was not to fly above 10,000 feet. But he just dropped the ladder in the back of the cabin and jumped out after the plane. There was also a huge thunderstorm outside. Winds were at 200 miles per hour. And he jumped out in a trench coat, business attire, and loafers. No one knows what happened to D.B. Cooper. As soon as they found out that somebody was holding an entire flight crew and its passengers for ransom, the FBI was on it. So they were already at the airport. They had opened the investigation. They were trying to figure out who this guy was. But after all of the information that they already had, D.B. Cooper was never found. His body was never found, the parachutes, the money, until I believe it was in the 80s. A kid was out fishing and I think camping with his dad, and they found, I think, $5,200 worth of $20 bills, which D.B. Cooper requested all $20 bills. They found it in the sand on the shore somewhere in Washington, or like Lake Washington, somewhere. Washington was definitely mentioned in that. So when it was turned into the FBI, they matched the serial numbers on those $20 bills to the serial numbers on the money that was also given to D.B. Cooper, so they knew that this was the money that he jumped out of the plane with. So they were like, okay, cool, we have more of a lead, because at this point they had like 200 suspects and they narrowed it down to like a final 20, but the suspects, one of them, he was already in jail because he did exactly the same, he committed exactly the same crime, like almost textbook, by hijacking a plane, but he was put into jail, and then later when he tried to break out of jail, he was killed. And the reason that he was discarded as a suspect was because this guy didn't match the description of what D.B. Cooper looked like, but I guess the reason he didn't was because his eyes were a different color, because D.B. Cooper was supposed to have blue eyes and then the suspect had brown eyes, or vice versa. So, I mean, was that enough evidence to discard it? Maybe not. But this guy anyway ended up being gunned down in I guess like an escape from his prison with a bunch of his friends. Another suspect was, actually there were a couple primary suspects, and they were both paratroopers. So they were in the military and they jumped out of airplanes, basically. But because D.B. Cooper had jumped out of the airplane in 200-mile-per-hour winds, and during the middle of a thunderstorm, it was also really dark outside, and he jumped into a heavily wooded area that was kind of like unknown. The FBI didn't think that DB was somebody who wasn't somebody who was an experienced skydiver, because an experienced skydiver never would have jumped under those conditions because it was so dangerous and so unknown. So that was kind of like, hey, we have these guys who were paratroopers, and this one stole $75,000 and he is under trial for murdering his stepdad, and he kind of matches the description, but that was later put to rest too. I think the most recent, or the number one suspect, he used to be a paratrooper as well, and his last name was McCroy. And he actually ended up dying in 2019, but they had no evidence really to support that he was or wasn't D.B. Cooper. They did receive some ransom notes throughout these 40 some years by the time that they had closed the case in 2016. They received ransom notes to different newspapers and magazine writers, and there were only 2 that were really considered suspect, because the rest of them were kind of like copycat killers or people who just wanted attention or to get their name in the paper kind of thing. But there were 2 that stood out to them, and they did investigate them, and they kind of decoded it to find out that maybe he was trying to say that his name was Lieutenant McCroy, who was the paratrooper that was under investigation, but then again, it kind of, because those two notes maybe said that, they had really nothing to go on, and it was discarded as well. So the reason that this case was closed before it was solved was because it had been ongoing for over 40 years. And the FBI was like, we definitely could be spending our money, our time, and our personnel in better ways than to try to solve this mystery that's leading nowhere. They had no additional leads. Yeah, they found this money back in the 80s and everything kind of seemed hopeful, but after that, it was kind of like they had nothing for 30 years. So it was really hard to justify keeping the case open. It is kind of interesting, though, because I know a lot of people have posted their theories and written about why they think or what happened to him, because his body was never found. They don't think that it was highly plausible that this man survived, yet they never found any of his belongings other than some of the money that had floated downriver. But I also didn't see anywhere in the articles where it said that they went on a mad hunt through the woods to see if they could find a dead body. I'm sure they did. That would be really dumb if they didn't. But I mean, it was kind of not uncharted territory, but it was very heavily wooded and kind of would have been a waste of time to put all that manpower and effort into looking for this man somewhere where they have no idea, because he just jumped out of the plane. Like, they just have a general area of over the United States between Washington and Reno where he might be. So it's kind of hard. It also is not suspected that D.B. Cooper had an accomplice, because somebody might be like, oh, well, when he jumped out of the plane, he parachuted down, somebody picked him up and got him out of the wilderness. Well, DB only told the flight crew to fly to New Mexico. There was no flight plan that he specifically requested, so really the plane could take off and it could fly a number of ways down to New Mexico, and nobody would really know where he would be because he had no idea what the flight plan or the flight route was. This is good, but I feel like it's so sugary. I mean, it is so sugary. So the mystery of D.B. Cooper remains unsolved, obviously. Case was closed. And really the FBI had no leads because nobody could identify the guy. He didn't use a real name. He didn't use a credit card or anything with his name on it. I don't know how he would have got his ticket without identification, but I didn't read anything about him having a fake ID. But I don't know. I mean, that's why it's unsolved. I really have no suspects myself. All the people who they had in mind, kind of because they had alibis or there were certain reasons in their history or that kind of steered the cops away from them. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It probably wasn't him, but I don't know. So I am done eating. Kind of a shorter video, I think. I mean, shorter with me talking, still probably the same in length, but me less talking, more eating. I feel in this video, just because it was kind of a shorter story. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and let me know down below what you want to see, maybe a story that you want me to look into and talk about. Yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video.